Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Teaching My Dad Football podcast.
It's quite
you won't know this, but this is not our first attempt of trying to record this. We've been having some issues with our software, and we've now opted for a different type of software. So hopefully this all goes very smoothly.
I'd hope so, because it's 10:20 p.m. and we've been here since I don't know about 8.
Yeah, it's not been smooth to say the least. It's been a bit bumpy, but we're here now and finally recording this episode.
First episode ever. I'm still wondering why on earth I've allowed myself to do this and embarrass myself big time, because I am truly not an expert of football.
Well, that's the reason for the name of the podcast, Teaching My Dad Football. You know, you're here to learn a little bit more about football, whether that be the tactics of the game, just teams in general. You're not exactly the best at recognising players on the pitch, even for Arsenal. We're both Arsenal fans. We've been going for, since 2009, we've been season ticket holders. And you still don't know our starting lineup of our last game in the Premier League, which was against Spurs of all teams, and you don't remember that.
I do remember the score, though.
Yeah, you remember the score. I mean, do you remember who scored?
No. Scary, isn't it?
Yeah,
well, never mind. It's my brain. I'm old.
Yeah, so essentially in today's podcast, will be rounding up like the League Cup results to maybe talking about the Premier League results of last weekend and going into next weekend's Premier League fixtures. Although, disclaimer, we are Arsenal fans, so this will be a little bit more heavily focused on Arsenal, but there are some big games this weekend.
And bear in mind that you'll be leading and I'll be saying pretty useless stuff, I guess, because of my lack of...
No. But I mean, I guess our first...
What do you want to start with?
We can start with the Carabao Cup fixtures. They were played on Tuesday and Wednesday. I mean, I watched the Arsenal game. It was 1-0 against Brentford. Fair to say it was a tale of two halves. I mean, you didn't watch the game, but first half was all Arsenal. Brentford looked a shell of themselves, really. You know, to expect them at home to give you a real good game. They're a good footballing side at home, but they just weren't up to scratch. Reece Nelson put the first goal away. Well, put the only goal of the game away, in fact, with a misplaced pass from one of their defenders, and Nketiah pounced on it and rolled it across the box, and Nelson then slotted it away in the bottom right corner, and that was the only goal of the game. Smith Rowe also came close in the first half, had a shot saved, and Brentford, to be honest, I can't really remember them having any real threats on goal in the first half. They had a couple sort of counter-attacks that looked
I'm gonna stop you there. Do you think it was a deserved win by Arsenal? I'm asking because
I don't think it was. I think if I mean, it's a cup game, so someone has to win. I think if you watch the game, especially both halves, you'd say it was a relatively even match in terms of Arsenal having lots of chances having quite a few good chances in the first half, Brentford having some good chances in the second half. At the end of the 90, I think 1-1 would have been fair, and then however extra time would have gone. So, I think Brentford will feel a little bit hard done by the fact that they weren't able to force it to extra time. But I mean, that's extra minutes when you don't really need that in a league season, especially if you're Arsenal.
So
European
you actually agree with, and remind me what Brentford's manager name is.
Thomas Frank.
You agree with him because apparently it's been said today that Arsenal, that we were lucky.
I don't know if we were lucky. I mean, their best chance of the game fell to Wissa. who Ramsdale produced an incredible save onto the post for. And then their other good chance was a sort of a block sort of near off the line by Kivior, who I thought had a great game, to be fair.
Right, and is it, you just mentioned Ramsdale, and is it true that Ramsdale was really excellent? That was it the man of the match, you think?
I think from Arsenal side, he has. I don't know if he's man of the match. I think some of the defenders were also really good. I think Kivior was really good. Tomiyasu was solid at centre back. Gabriel didn't really put a foot wrong either. But Ramsdale made some crucial saves that definitely kept the lead for Arsenal. So, man of the match, I mean, he would have been up there, I think, for sure. I'm not sure if I would have given it to him necessarily, but he was one of the best players on the pitch, and he's a major reason as to why Arsenal into the round of 16.
Which is maybe going to bring me to ask the other question. Do you think that Ramsdale should play the next game? Honest answer. I know
mean,
this is difficult because, everyone has got different, have had different reactions about him not being on the pitch so far. But
I don't think he will play. I think it will be Raya. Whether he should play or not, look, there's lots of emotion into it because Ramsdale came into the club at a time when the club wasn't doing so well. So a lot of people like him because he's a good personality. He seems like a good guy. Sort of like a bit more of a vocal keeper as well. Likes playing likes having a dig at the away fans when he's on the pitch as well.
Yeah, true.
So I think people like his character more so than maybe his actual goalkeeping ability. And I think Arteta saw from Ramsdale last season is that he made a couple of mistakes in the run-in, and whether that be the Jared Bowen goal against West Ham, a shot that he should have been saving, but he didn't. And then the pass out from the back against Southampton, where in the first minute of the game, and they go 1-0 up from that. And in those moments, from your keeper, if you look at any great team, they'll also have a keeper that just doesn't really make mistakes, or doesn't make mistakes in the high pressure situations. Whether you'll see Edison and Alisson make an odd mistake here and there, but it won't be in the run-in. They're almost like both of them are almost flawless in the run-in. When it comes to the run-in, they know exactly what they're doing, and when your keeper is making just an odd mistake here and there, it's can you then trust him again? Can you trust him despite how brilliant he's been for 95% of it? Those 5% come at the worst possible time. And I think Arteta's probably made his mind up internally. I know to the press and whatnot he's saying about the whole rotating the keepers thing, but I don't think he's doing that because he actually wants to do that. I think he knows he has to have a number one, and I think that number one will be Raya. And I think we'll see Ramsdale in the cup games. If Arsenal qualify top of the group in the Champions League a little bit early, I think you'll see Ramsdale for maybe the last one or two games in that in the group stages as well. But I think at least going forward at Premier League and Champions League, it's going to be David Raya.
Right, so you think that. And let's talk about, because obviously that's what Ramsdale you think Arteta is going to do. What do you think he should do? You personally, because I think, it's a part of me thinking I would have loved to see Ramsdale playing, the game
That's still
against,
the number one.
Yeah, and play the PSD Eindhoven first game in so many years back in the Champions League.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that just maybe for the first game that Arteta would have rewarded Ramsdale, given that he was the keeper that came in and was part of that team that got us back into the Champions League, that he would have rewarded him with the first game in that. But it seems as if, though, Arteta is being ruthless and is saying, no, this is my decision. I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm not going to start Raya in an away game at Everton, a typically really tough ground for us to go to and pick up a result. And then in the Champions League game start Ramsdale, and it just wouldn't make sense. I think you'll be seeing unless Raya makes a couple of mistakes in the Premier League or the Champions League, he'll be our starting number one. And only if that then happens does he then revert back to Ramsdale. But I can't. Raya's a really good keeper, and he was really good at Brentford. And if you look at the statistics, he's a better shot stopper and he's better with his feet than Ramsdale is. So
we'll have to wait and see. But I think, do you think that, and this is the last question on this point, that this bit that we're discussing now is something that a lot of the Arsenal fans are chatting about?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a talking point that every Arsenal fan is aware of right now.
Right.
Some people are saying, no, I want Ramsdale to start, or they're like, no, I back Arteta and his decision for David Raya. But at the end of the day, we can all have our opinions, but it's about the 11 men out on the pitch and whoever's that starting number one keeper for Arsenal, and you got to support them. We can all have our opinions and our talking points about it, but that's not going to affect what. I don't think that's going to affect Arteta's decision.
I'm open. I'm pretty sure it's not going to affect the performance of the team. Because arguably he's making the calls and the best choices and decision.
I'm sure maybe some of the players might have seemed a bit surprised about it. That being said, though, when we brought Ramsdale in a couple of years ago, it was the flip side of it, where Ramsdale was in the position that Raya is in which we started the first few games with Leno in goal, and then Ramsdale came in and took that number one spot. And
I do remember, yeah. And then it was like, so we're back to that, and it's difficult.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe to the players who were there at the club then, the decision for Raya to then come in may not seem that much of a shock to them, but because they've already seen it happen. So I don't think it will necessarily affect the players on the pitch. They're playing outfield. All
right, and so what? And then gonna move on to other things. In terms of Carabao Cup, for Arsenal, I'm gonna ask you a question. What do you think about the next game, because they've been chosen to play against West Ham
away, which is it's not an easy fixture. It's not the hardest possible fixture you could have got in there, but it's one of those ones where you're going away to it and you're going to have to play a decently strong side. And I just think, it will be a midweek game. It's, we're already playing Champions League games, so whenever that game is, I'll have a look. I mean, it's 31st of October.
So it's a month away.
So it's still in the midst of, Champions League group stages. So, I mean, it's just an extra midweek game where you're going to have to, if you want to progress past West Ham, which I'm sure Arteta will want to do, you're going to have to play a pretty strong squad to beat them at their ground. It's not an easy place to go.
Right, yeah, and it will be an interesting game, but
especially with Declan Rice going back, possibly
back home. Yeah. So I think we can stop about chatting about Arsenal, and we can talk about some of the other games. Which one do you want to pick? And I think it was one of the games I think was interesting.
I mean, I watched some of the highlights of it, which was the Newcastle City game. Newcastle finally beating City after I don't know when was the last time they beat City, but they beat them 1-0. And at the start of the game, when you looked at the team that Newcastle put out, they didn't put out the strongest squad. They didn't put out the strongest starting 11 possible that they could. I mean, neither did City, but you know what City are like. They don't have to put out their strongest 11, and they'll still turn over teams.
Yeah.
So
what surprised you though? You know, because obviously what you're saying is that neither team put their strongest team.
I mean,
but
I think the thing that surprised me was the closest that City came in the game was with their last attempt on goal, which was in the 90-something minute from Rico Lewis. He had a shot from just outside the box, just go wide of the post. And that was the closest they came in the game. I think they only had 1 or 2 shots on target. Newcastle, especially with their rotation at the back, I mean, I think it was, Jamal Lascelles, Paul Dummett was playing as well. Players that were defenders that, they were starting under in the previous years when they weren't particularly good. And yet they performed really well. They defended really well. City didn't really create much. And then Alexander Isak popped up with a goal. Sorry. Kind
of remember, although as you said, they didn't bring the strongest team on, but kind of reminds you that you can beat City.
Yeah, you can definitely beat them, especially when they're not playing their strongest squads. You can go toe to toe with them, which is what Newcastle did really.
And obviously they got quite a number of injuries at the moment, and so
yeah, I mean it doesn't help that City had injuries, and obviously Rodri's red card didn't help them either.
Right, and so that's quite an interest. What do you think? Was there any other game that you think?
I mean,
was interesting enough to
just running through the results. Burnley progressing, beat Salford 4-0. Exeter City beating Luton 1-0. I mean, that's a bit of an upset for sure. I mean, I know as poor as Luton have been in the Prem this season, they're a good enough side that they should be beating Exeter City. That's for sure.
So you think that was a surprise that they lost, right?
Yeah. Considering that Exeter are a League 2 side. If you're a Premier League team losing to a League 2 side, it's not a great look. Are they League 2 or are they?
I don't know.
No, sorry, League 1. Sorry,
League 1.
But even still, losing to a side that's 2 divisions below you I know as much as Luton are a bit more of a sort of a championship side. They should be beating Exeter.
And perhaps that's a common as
I mean, Luton, I think they're really gonna struggle this year. And you've seen that already. Their game at the weekend against Wolves. Wolves go down to 10 men in the first, just towards the end of the first half. And Luton, who are at home at that point, they come close to taking the lead, but then all of a sudden on a counter-attack, Pedro Neto bombs down the right-hand side, cuts in and hits a shot in the inside the box to the roof of the net with his left foot. And they go 1-0 up, and Luton do end up drawing the game. They get a penalty, and they end up scoring from that. Carlton Morris scored the equaliser, but in a game in which they're playing against a 10-man sided Wolves who have not had the greatest start to the season themselves, you'd think that might be their chance really to go to win their first game, and the fact that they didn't take that is, I think, just a sign of that they're going to struggle this season.
What do you think the weaknesses are? Is there anything and
just quality across the pitch? They're just
there's not much. So there's not much that their manager
there's not much.
can do.
No. There's not much. Like, it'd be a miracle. Like, it was a miracle already that they came up, considering the situation. Being promoted from the, clawing their way back into the Football League 9 years ago, and making their way up the league into the Championship, towards the top of the Championship for a couple seasons. They made it into the playoffs the season before they came up as well. And then obviously they ended up winning the playoff final last season, and they're in the Prem now. But it was already, as I said, it was already a miracle enough that they came up. It'd be even more of a miracle for them to stay up, considering the lack of, just general lack of spending in the club. Like, you look at how much they've spent on players. I think it's under 10 million. Their current squad, they've spent under 10 million. I mean, they're the lowest value squad in the league, obviously, as well. So,
they're gonna have a difficult season at best. In any case, right?
I mean, they will go down. I can't see a world in which they stay up. I think the thing for them is just how many points do they get? Do they beat Derby's 11-point record of being relegated on 11 points, which was set maybe 15 years ago now.
So that's what they are going to have to play against.
They're going
right?
to struggle.
Right.
The fact that they're not beating Exeter in the League Cup is not a great sign. I'm not sure about the strength of the squad they put out, but regardless, you should be beating a League One side. I mean, as for other games, maybe upsets. I mean, Ipswich Town beat Wolves, although I wouldn't say that's necessarily a massive upset. Considering Ipswich are flying in the Championship right now, came up from League One. I thought that they were going to do pretty well in the Championship this season. I actually think of all the promoted sides, if any of them were going to make the playoffs for the Championships this year, I thought they had the best chance, and they're currently sitting in, I think, second spot. They've won 7, lost 1. And they came down from 2-0 against Wolves, and they came back to win 3-2.
So what makes them particularly strong then? Still, even
they've got good management. They've got some good quality across the pitch. They've got some players that they've got on loan from some Premier League clubs. Amari Hutchinson is one. He scored in the game against Wolves. I think he scored their first goal. Sort of pull it back to 2-1. So just a 1-goal deficit for Ipswich at that point. Amari Hutchinson was a academy player at Arsenal and made a move to Chelsea, which a lot of people didn't understand why he wouldn't stay with the Arsenal academy, considering Chelsea's success of academy players recently hasn't been great. I mean, they've never had a great history of academy players coming through the ranks and making the first team, but especially now looking at the situation of the club entirely, like, I mean, there's no chance for him there, really. I don't think. They have so many players, and, it's part of the reason why he went out on loan. But scored in the game. Good goal as well, on his left foot. And Wolves will be disappointed with themselves, especially going 2-0 up in the game, to then go and lose it. But Ipswich are a good footballing side. And they were at home. So
it's not a major surprise.
No, it's not.
From your point of view. So, it's not...
it's not a massive upset, no.
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at the rest of them, I mean, Middlesbrough winning, Mansfield winning, Port Vale, United beat Palace 3-0. I mean, they're at home. They should be beating Palace, who they've also got in the Premier League this weekend, which is interesting, because later on we're going to get onto this weekend's Premier League games and we're going to do some predictions, I think.
Yeah, that'd be good. And in terms of them playing against Man U, playing against Crystal Palace again, could you expect them to perform?
Palace?
Or... what do you think?
Games are always a little bit different. I mean, I do wonder if they actually just stayed up in Manchester, the team, and just trained at some other pitches in the meantime, because I don't know if it'd make much sense to go back down from Manchester, just come straight back up at the weekend, just a couple of days later. But I'm not sure. I mean, Liverpool beat Leicester 3-1. Szoboszlai scored a incredible goal from outside the box. Right foot. Absolutely rifled it into the top left corner. I don't know if you saw it.
No, I didn't. I didn't see it. And no chance for the keeper?
No chance. I'll try and see if I can find it to show you now.
Right. But Liverpool is having a pretty good start of the season in any case.
Yeah, I mean, they're on 16 points in the league.
What do you think has made them, because compared to last season, where they were obviously not on top of things, what is changed for them?
It's that new midfield. They just have so much more legs in that midfield now. With Szoboszlai, McAllister, Endo now sitting at a DM spot compared to last year where you're relying on Fabinho old legs and Henderson old legs, and then Thiago, who's still there but last season at least suffered with a lot of injury issues, and you're then having to play maybe Javier Elliott into the midfield. I don't know, this is not really his natural position, but their midfield was struggling a lot. They didn't have much protect, and while their back line has got quality in it, they didn't have in the seasons gone by. They've had protection from their midfield and they've had legs from their midfield, whereas they didn't have that last season. But they seem to be getting that back. Will they hit the same heights that they did? That you look at 2 seasons ago where they challenged for the league. I'm not so sure they'll challenge for the league again, but they'll be a good side. But I would expect them to be to get themselves back in the Champions League.
But basically have the legs to play in the way that the manager wants them to play.
Yeah, that Klopp wants them to play. That heavy metal football. Although they are seeming to be. Look, here's the goal.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah, I
mean, not much that the keeper could do.
Rifled it into the top corner. I mean,
yeah, amazing.
He's a brilliant ball striker. I mean, if you'd ever watched him at when he was at Leipzig in the Bundesliga, or playing for the Hungarian national team, he's always had that in his locker, and I mean, you should see it there, the quality of the guy.
So good for Liverpool.
People were a little bit unsure about when they signed him for 70 million. They triggered that release clause, 70 million. I think people thought, that's a lot of money for a guy. When you looked at his numbers, they weren't the highest for the Bundesliga. But, I mean, just watching him in his first few games, he's good on the ball.
Just the quality.
Ball striking technique, left foot, right foot as well. He's pretty good. His right foot is he's got a sledgehammer of a right foot, but his left foot is still pretty decent as well. So, I mean, he's a perfect fit for Klopp, really.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, I'm pleased for them because I quite like Liverpool. I'm pleased to see that they perform it again.
I think
after
we're talking about Liverpool. I mean, I think this. I know as much, so far in the Premier League, I think their biggest test was on the first day of the season. They played away at Chelsea, but they weren't particularly great in that game after the first sort of 25 minutes when they kind of dominated Chelsea, and they went 1-0 up, and they could have scored a second, I think. In fact, they did put a second goal in the back of the net in that game, but it was ruled offside. But I think this weekend they've got their biggest test coming up, which is on Saturday at 5:30. They're playing Spurs, and they're playing away at Spurs, who have also to themselves had a very good start of the season. So it'll be interesting to see how Liverpool cope with playing against a side that, so far at least, you say is one of the top sides in the Premier League, at least at the start of the season. Also for Spurs to see how they cope with playing against a Liverpool side as well that is very high energy, that their press is great. I think it'll be an interesting game to watch at least. That's for sure. I think there'll be goals in that game.
It is hard to predict what it's kind of hard to predict, what, because the game could end up.
I mean, the game could go either way, really. I mean, going back to the League Cup though, just looking at some of the other results, Chelsea beat Brighton. I mean, That's a good result for Chelsea, getting past Brighton.
Given that Brighton is
they're a
not
good
exactly
side.
they're a good side.
But I do wonder how much playing in Europe is going to start to affect them in terms of having those midweek games more often, given that they lost their first Europa League game, I believe.
And, do you think that, the manager may start thinking, be more careful about, who's going to send on the pitch, for, different games, given that he's, may want to focus more on a particular competition rather than another one. Obviously they're out.
He's going to have to rotate. It's just whether I don't think they have the depth really to rotate. They're suffering with some injury issues at the moment as well. I think the major one was his name's gone from my head now. That's not the role of me to do that. They're number 10. Who's their number 10?
You may remember. It's not important. You just say number 10, and then if it comes to your
South American guy.
Yeah.
I don't know why his name has gone from my head all of a sudden, but they're suffering with a few injuries right now. Not just him, but across the pitch, they've got some injury issues, and their depth will be tested this season. That's for sure. Especially if they are going to progress in the Europa League, which, I hope they do. They're a good footballing side, Brighton. They're fun to watch.
Remind me, who's the manager?
Italian, De Zerbi.
De Zerbi,
yeah. They're an exciting team to watch in terms of the way that they play and they build up from the back. And they've already had some really good results this season in the Premier League. Whether that be beating Newcastle 3-1, they beat United 3-1 at Old Trafford. So I think they'll be a bit disappointed with that Chelsea result as well. Chelsea will be delighted though that they finally won a game for the first time, and they didn't just have to. They didn't beat. I think their only win this season was against Luton. So although they played in the League Cup in an earlier round in the League Cup, but they'll be happy. Pochettino will be a bit of a sigh of relief to beat a decent side in Brighton as well. And then just looking at some of the other results, Bournemouth progressing, beating Stoke. Everton going to Villa away and getting 2-1. That's a good result for Everton. Although they played really well at the weekend against Brentford because they went there and beat them 3-1. I watched some of the game. They looked like more of an Everton of old in terms of their press, the way that they suffocated Brentford at times, and they really just dominated the game for the most part. Everton went 1-0 up after about 5 minutes in that game, and then Brentford equalised in the first half, but with their first attack of the game, Brentford, and it took a while for them to have their first attack of the game. I've also just remembered the Brighton player's name, Enciso. Don't know why his name went from my head, but I just remembered it for some reason. And then the other result was Fulham beating Norwich.
Do you think Everton is going to have a better season than this year?
I think they'll be in a relegation battle again as well.
Do you?
I think they'll struggle again.
Why is that? Why do you think they're going to struggle? Is it again because of?
It's just really
they have
the lack of quality in that side. Now I think they will stay up, and I think what will keep them up is the luck. They're lucky that the teams below them aren't great, and I think in a lot of other Premier League seasons, especially in the seasons gone by when they've just about stayed up, they've tested their luck at times. Especially last season, it took a win on the final day for them to stay up. But lucky for them, I think Sheffield and Luton are almost definite in terms of going down. Although I think Sheffield recently have shown a bit of fight, and that they'll be able to maybe fight a bit more to stay up. And Burnley, I think, are going to need to. As much as I think a lot of people thought at the beginning that they were going to come up and play, Kompany's a good manager and they're going to play their football, but they've really struggled so far, and he's going to need to adapt quickly to try and get some, because the Premier League is a results-based business. He can't afford to be playing the football that he wants to be playing if they're not putting points on the board, because he will find himself sacked. As much as I think the higher ups at the club will respect him because of where he got them back to the Premier League in just one season, they will also know we can't risk trying to play this type of football and getting ourselves relegated again, because we can't afford another. Well, we can afford another season down in the Championship, but it's a struggle to get. We've got to try and then get back into the Premier League. And they'll want at least a few seasons in the Premier League, especially with new owners coming in. I don't think they'll want to go straight back down to the Championship again.
So you think the manager is going to have difficult season in any case?
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna have to change their play style, because I mean, like, going against watching their game against United, they created some chances in the first half against a weakened United side, and they couldn't take them. I mean, that seems to be one of their main issues so far this season, is just the lack of goals. But when they're not, they need to make sure they're defensively solid, and they've just not got that right now. You can play all the nicest football in the world, but if you're not putting the ball in the back of the net and getting points on the board, you're gonna struggle. And Company is going to need to find the solution to that. I think is going to come. He's going to need to find it fast, because they're going to struggle otherwise.
So maybe one last question about them. So do you think that their defense is weak because of the playing setup that Company's put in place, rather than the quality of the players?
I think it's the play style that's. Look, if you want to set up in a low block, you can do that, and for the players that they do have, they have enough quality to be able to set up in a low block and play relatively, defensively solid football. I mean, any good professional side is capable of doing that. It's just at the moment they're playing a bit too expansive, and they're leaving space in behind. And against the game against Burnley, it was a ball over the top from Johnny Evans, perfectly weighted, to be fair, to Bruno Fernandes, who then watches it all the way and then hits it on a first-time volley past the keeper, and United end up winning the game 1-0. But Burnley should have gone 1-0 up. They hit the post in that game, and I mean, looking forward ahead to this weekend,
who they have
this weekend, they play away at Newcastle, so
yeah,
tough game for them.
Yeah,
they're only on 1 point so far, Burnley, and I think they'll struggle to. I mean, I can't see them getting any result out of that game. I think moving on now, we are going to talk about this weekend's Premier League fixtures. We're going to do quickly, in order of the fixtures on here. We're going to do some score predictions. So starting off, the early kickoff on Saturday, Villa-Brighton. Villa at home to Brighton. What do you think the score's going to be in that game?
I think Brighton is going to win 1-0.
Brighton 1-0. Interesting.
What do you think? What about you?
I mean, Villa are a decent side, especially at home in the league this season. They've been solid, and so it's difficult to say really, because they're both at a similar level. I think it's one of those games that can really go either way. I think Villa could turn up on the day and beat Brighton. Brighton could turn up on the day and beat Villa. And for that reason, I'm going to go for a draw.
Right. What? How many goals?
I'm going to go for 1-1.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Then who's next?
And then moving on, repeat of the midweek fixture, United Palace. They're playing again. I think the score will be a bit different this time, though. Personally,
because of the nature of the game, not because of.
Yeah, I think just I'll play different lineups as well. I mean, I think looking at their their game in the League Cup, their lineup was. Hold on, let me get it up now. But looking at United's lineup was, a changed one. They're playing a weaker squad, and the same goes for. The same goes for Palace as well. So, they'll go back to their strongest 11s at the weekend. So I think it will be a different result. I think Palace will give United a decent game though. Just given that United haven't been great this season, Palace have been decent actually to start this season so far.
So what do you expect? Do you expect a draw, or what would you expect?
It's Old Trafford. I still think United will win, but I think it will be closer than 3-0. I'd probably go for a 2-1 personally. I don't know what you're thinking.
Well, I think they're going to win, but I just don't know. The score, it could be a 2-0, as you said, a 2-1, but even even a draw at 1-1.
Yeah.
It's quite possible.
Yeah, I don't think Palace will win, that's for sure. But anyways, moving on to that one that we mentioned just a little bit ago about Newcastle and Burnley. Newcastle is just going to hammer them. They're flying at the moment. They'll be really confident off the win against City. Last weekend they absolutely battered Sheffield 8-0 away from home. And if Burnley are going to try and play their football away at St James's Park, I think they will struggle. And it could be they could run the scoreline up Newcastle in this game. It's that sort of game where if they score a couple goals early, I think Burnley will then fold. Although I don't think Company will like that. They will fold and Newcastle will score a few more. Personally, though, they scored 8 last weekend, but I'm going to go for 4-0. I think they'll get a solid 4-0 win. I can't see Burnley scoring, to be fair.
No, I think the moment Newcastle, you just saw the performance, you would expect them to to have a really good game and really big, have a good big win. I don't know. I just don't know. They're going to score these.
Yeah, they seem to be kicking into gear after a little bit of a slow. I know they beat Villa on the first day 5-1, but a little bit of a slow start to the season for them. But I think they'll get kicking back into gear now, especially since they've played. I think maybe for those first number of Premier League games, as the Champions League game was maybe hanging over their head a little bit, looking forward to that. Maybe it was sort of distracting them a little bit, but they've played that now. Although I do think they'll rest some players this game, Newcastle, just because I know in the midweek next week they've got PSG, I think at home, and that'll be their toughest game, I think.
Right, so the only thing that may affect the end result, they're going to win, but the question is that may not win, but the many goals just because
that's why I wouldn't go for like a 5 or a 6. I think they'll get 4. Just they'll rest a few players, and they'll. I think if they score some goals early on, they'll then take their foot off the gas a little bit. They won't go for a hammering again, like they did against Sheffield. So what would you say? Score?
Score, I don't know, maybe a 3-0.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on, Wolves City. Wolves at home to City. I can't see this going any other way. I know maybe a few years ago you would have said Wolves to try and get a result out of City, which they did do a few times, but City they're just too good. They've won 6 in the league so far. I know they've lost their first game this season against Newcastle, but they're playing a weaker side. Wolves aren't particularly great.
Although there will be plenty of fans of other teams, including us, they would.
Oh yeah, of course we will be wanting Wolves to try and get something out of that game. But
please, Wolves, perform.
I can't see it happening. I think City is just too strong defensively right now as well.
Even with their
injuries and the red card to Rodri, I think they'll still breeze that game.
So score?
I don't see them scoring a lot of goals, City, in that game. I think they'll sort of just control it. I think they'll go for I think it'll be 2-0.
2-0, and there is a bit on me, like not just from an Arsenal point of view, but other teams' point of view, is going to hope that somehow there will be a 1-1 end result. with City dropping 2 points, and that is very wishful thinking, but
Yeah.
maybe God knows. But I agree with you.
So what's your final prediction?
I think 1-1.
You think 1-1 first?
Yeah.
I mean, I hope
Yeah.
it'd be 1-1, but I'm not sure it will be. I don't know when, by the time this goes out, if the game would have been played already, but we'll see if that comes true.
Who we got next?
And then the next game that we're going to be talking about, Arsenal-Bournemouth. Arsenal away to Bournemouth this time.
Right, you tell me.
I mean, we're very good away from home. We don't really concede goals away from home. In fact, I mean, we've not conceded away from home at all this season so far. We only like conceding at home. So I think it will be another clean sheet for Arsenal. Bournemouth are struggling to put the ball in the back of the net themselves a little bit, and so I think Arsenal will go there and get a win. I don't know if they'll win emphatically though, just because I think Bournemouth will set up a bit more defensively. I mean, I hope they try and not set up defensively, because if they don't, we'll score a lot of goals. But given the way that we've not really been clicking with our attack this season, I'd probably go for a 2-0 for Arsenal.
2-0?
Yeah, 2-0, I think. Just solid.
Right. And I think instead we're just going to suffer a bit, and it's going to be a 1-0. Arsenal is going to win, but...
You think another 1-0 away from home?
Yeah.
I mean, that's all our wins away from home this season have been 1-0, 1-0, 1-0. We've had 1-0 at Palace, 1-0 at Everton, and then in the League Cup against Brentford, 1-0 win. So
I think it's going to be a repeat,
keep up the pattern and be another 1-0 win.
And poor Arsenal fans, us, will suffer till the end of the game.
I mean, it might just be one of those ones where we win 1-0, but Bournemouth don't really do much at all, like against Everton. I mean, at Palace, they, the last sort of 30 minutes in that game, it was the red card to Tomiyasu, and they came into the game, but they didn't really create anything. Brentford gave us our best test so far, but again, we stood firm and didn't concede away from home, and I think we'll be keeping that up. But I personally think Arsenal will get 2. You go for a 1-0. Next game, West Ham at home to Sheffield United. West Ham have had pretty good starts to the season so far. I think a lot better than a lot of people would have thought they would have. Obviously, I think people saw the loss of Declan Rice this summer, but they've almost sometimes having a player of that quality and selling him for such a big price tag can help you, because they get a little bit more where he was sort of the focal point of their midfield in the past few years. I know as much as they brought in Paqueta as well, he didn't have the best of seasons last year, Paqueta. But they've added some good quality into their midfield, with James Ward-Prowse, with the Mexican guy they bought from Ajax as well. They've also bought Mohamed Kudus from Ajax as well. So they've got a lot more strength in the midfield now, and they've had a good start to the season. And I think they'll keep it up that way. Do
you think it's going to be, a big score?
No, I don't think it'll be a big score, but I think West Ham will win comfortably. I think they'll win 3. I'll give Sheffield a go. I think they'll be 3-1.
I think it's going to be, personally, I think it's going to be a 2-0, but I agree with you. To West Ham, and I think West Ham is going to have a good game, as there is not going to be sufficient level of resistance on the other side.
Yeah, Sheffield's just don't have the quality necessary to go away from home and win. Although they almost did it against Spurs, and then decided to concede 2 very late goals in that game, and that'd be a devastating result for them, not picking the 3 points away up in that game, because points they'll struggle for this season, and that game, being 1-0 up in the 97th minute, and then 3 minutes later being 2-1 down was, you know, you sat in the away end. If that game, I think I would, if I was sat in that away end, I'd just be thinking, what the hell has just happened?
Right.
Almost a win away at Spurs 1-0, and we've just gone and conceded twice in the space of a couple minutes and lost the game 2-1. But yeah, I don't give them much luck in that West Ham game either. Moving on, the final 3 p.m. fixture on the Saturday. Battle at the bottom of the table. Luton are going away to Everton.
Somehow, I can't help thinking that, just Everton is going to win.
Yeah, I think they'll, two wins on the bounce, one in the league, one in the League Cup. I think that's a bit of confidence for them. They'll get their gears turning now. Goodison Park's a difficult place to go as well. They've actually had some, as much as I think they've lost quite a few times at Goodison Park this season, they've had some good performances there. I think the first couple games, they had some good performances, struggled to put the ball in the back of the net. They created plenty of chances, they just couldn't score. But Dyche just seems to have figured something out with their attack, and, they scored 3 against Brentford away from home, which is, a difficult place to go and even pick up a win. Not to mention to, dominate the game and win 3-1. And Luton, I don't think they're good enough, and I think Everton will win.
I think it's going to be a relatively easy win. I'll just give it maybe a 2-0.
Yeah, I think
Luton will be able to.
I think Everton will create plenty of chances, and I think they'll win. Although I think they'll still struggle in terms of their goal scoring at home. But I will give them a 1-0 win against Luton. Sort of climb their way up to the mid-table. And then the big game of the weekend coming up, Tottenham-Liverpool.
All right.
Which we touched on a little bit earlier, but I guess we can kind of just go straight into our score predictions now for this game. I think it'll be an entertaining game. I'm actually really looking forward to watching it. Score, though, personally, I think it'll be 2-2. I think it will be end-to-end. I think it'll they'll be trading blows, really. But I think it will end up in a draw. But I'd go for 2-2, but I think it's one of those ones that could go either way.
Could go either way. And I think, for me, because I agree with you, there's going to be plenty of goals somehow. But I can see Liverpool having a slight edge on Spurs, and it could be either a 2-1 or a 3-2 for Liverpool.
Fair enough. Yeah. And then no Monday fixture this week. She's got 2 Sunday fixtures. Oh no, there is a Monday fixture this week. I stand corrected. Only 1 Sunday game this weekend. That's Forest at home to Brentford, which I think is actually a pretty interesting game, to be fair. Forest are pretty good at home, and Brentford will be looking to get back to winning ways. Forest have had a decent start, and Brentford, they've both had sort of solid starts, decent starts to the season. Sort of
How they're set on the table.
As for the table, currently, they're right next to each other. Forest are currently on 7 points, and Brentford just below them on 6 points. Forest have won twice, drawn once, lost 3, whereas Brentford have only won 1 game, but they've drawn 3 games and only lost at 2.
So this is how Brentford is under pressure to win a game, a bit more than.
Yeah,
could they?
They very well could. It's just whether their attackers can convert. Obviously still no Ivan Toney. There's obviously been some rumours recently about his future at the club. Whether Wissa and Mbuemo can convert their chances enough, I'm not so sure. But that being said, I think it will be. I don't know if it will be the most thrilling game to watch, but I think in terms of one of those games that maybe you wouldn't necessarily watch always, being Forest and Brentford being sort of two sort of mid-table-y clubs clash that, most of the time you'd see comes up and you'd be like, oh, I'm not going to watch that. It seems a bit boring, it's not one of the big sides playing. But I think it won't be too bad of a game. But I think I'll give Forest the edge. I think at home, I think they'll prevail. Although I do think Brentford will score, but I'd go Forest for a 2-1 win.
Right, I think it's going to be a draw, 1-1.
1-1 draw? Okay, fair enough. And then the final game of the week.
It's
the match day is the Monday 8 p.m. West London derby, just round the corner from each other. It's Fulham versus Chelsea. Fulham, who beat Chelsea at home last season. In fact, I think they also drew away from home as well. It's a big game for Chelsea because they've struggled for wins in the league this season. I mean, they find themselves sitting down in 14th, only on 5 points, with the only win coming against Luton at home. So they've struggled really, Chelsea. Although they are pretty good defensively, they just can't put the ball in the back of the net. I mean, I think I saw a stat the other day. They've had some of the most, in terms of big chances created. They've had also the most big chances missed in the league this season. And actually in the league this season, they've won, I don't know if you know the statistics about, it's called expected goals. You ever heard of it?
No. Oh, yeah, I have heard about it.
Expected goals. So essentially it's just a stat that's calculated based off the shots that you have on goal. There's some data algorithms and people calculate it in terms of the chance that you've taken in terms of a shot on goal, and what usually that what you would say that expected goal rate would be. So a shot from an open goal from 2 yards out is going to create a higher expected goal than a 35 yard volley first time. So Chelsea have created lots of chances, and in fact in the Premier League so far this season, they've in terms of XG, they've not actually had anyone beat them on XG this season, but they can't put the ball in the back of the net. They just can't put them in. I think they failed to score in their last 3 Premier League games, and they've only scored 5 times this season, with 3 of those goals coming against Luton.
Why is that happening?
They just don't have a clinical striker, and their wingers aren't clinical either. So you're looking at their front 3 that they're playing. Obviously I know they've got Nkunku out right now, who's their best goal scorer. Although we haven't seen him play a competitive game yet for Chelsea. You only saw him in the preseason, but he's going to be the player that when he eventually does come back, he's going to be the one who can put the ball in the back of the net a lot. But I mean, Nicholas Jackson has missed. I think his conversion rate on big chances so far in the Premier League this season is 14%, which is incredibly low. Whether he, I mean, that's got to be a confidence thing now, when he's just missing chance after chance after chance. At some point he's got to put the ball in the back of the net. Or he did do it against Brighton in midweek, but so you're thinking maybe can he kick on from that? But Chelsea going away to Fulham, who themselves haven't had as strong of a start of the season as they did last year. Although they do sit in 11th, which I think is sort of where most people would expect them to be. Last season they started really well, the league. But Chelsea, if they win, can climb up the table a little bit, which they need to start doing quickly.
So they'll be really under pressure, to do that, because the expectations are even.
Yeah, because they're only on 5 points, Chelsea. I mean, there was also another statistic that came out this week, which is looking at all the games that have been played. I think it includes this calendar year of all Premier League teams that have played a game this calendar year. They have, I think it's joint, the least number of points for teams that were in the league this season and last season since the start of the calendar year. So all the teams that are below Chelsea have only either just come up or were teams that got relegated last season. So the calendar year table for them is not looking pretty. I mean, they're, in terms of teams that were in the league last season and in the league this season, they are joint bottom with Everton, only above them on goal difference.
So
they've been shocking the past year, and I think that's clear for everyone to see. Chelsea fans will know it the most. So they need to win this game against Fulham, especially with it being a derby game.
do you think they can? So going back to
I think
prediction,
can. It's purely whether they can put the ball in the back of the net.
So going back to your prediction now.
I think they will finally. You know what it will be? It'll be one of those games where they just click in front of goal, and I think they'll win. I think they'll win 2-0.
Do you think so? I think I'm going to go the opposite way. I think Fulham is going to win 1-0.
Fair enough. I mean, I think it is one of those games that could go either way. But yeah. Oh, and I guess we'll touch on the game that's being played midweek between Luton and Burnley, because it was a game that was postponed at the start of the season. Game week 2, because Luton Stadium wasn't ready. It's ready now, and so they'll be playing on Tuesday. I mean, it's another fight at the bottom for them. They'll both be looking at that and licking their lips, thinking we can finally get a win on the board here. Because I don't think either of them are getting a win on the board this weekend. So I guess for that game, I mean, Luton are at home.
I would have thought Luton to win. I think they're going to win.
It's a tough one. But I think unfortunately for both sides, as much as they want to win, that will end up being a draw. I mean, they're both struggling in front of goal. They both struggled in front of goal this season, so I think it will only be 1-1, personally.
Do you think so? I think it's going to be a 1-0 for Luton.
Fair enough. And I think that kind of
covers it all, right?
Covers it all, really. For the first ever episode.
Yeah,
teaching my dad football.
Yeah, teaching your dad football. And so all I know is that somehow it still strikes me as I don't understand how that happens. That you know a lot about things, and I don't know how they stick in your head.
Information pretty well.
Yeah, and I know nothing at all. But that was pretty good.
Yeah. Hope you learned something a little bit from this episode.
Yeah, probably. The thing is that you said so many things. I probably
maybe some of the listeners
probably
learned a little bit.
Probably remember 1 or 2, not even. I'm not sure. Ask me tomorrow. People can do double check.
For anyone wondering, his memory is like a goldfish. In fact, I could ask him some stuff now about what I said, and he won't remember any of it.
Yeah,
but maybe eventually, after just having this going for so long, it will eventually start to stick.
Yeah, probably. Well, don't taste me. Don't taste me. But
no, I mean, I think we mentioned. Maybe we mentioned it on one of our on the failed recording that we were going to do a little bit of a test at some point.
We should have some test at some point. On my
I think also. Something we forgot to do right at the beginning of the episode was introduce our names. I don't think to the people who are listening to this who don't know our names. I mean, I'll say hello to the people on YouTube who might be watching this down the lens, but if you're listening to this on any of the streaming services, and you can't see my face, but I'll leave. You can find our links to our socials. Whether that be on one of our podcast pages on streaming services or underneath this YouTube video. But for those wondering, my name is Joe. I'm 21 years old. Live in North London. Have done basically all my life.
Yeah, and my name is Emmy. I'm not going to tell how old I am because it's more than 21. Given you my son. And obviously I live equally in North London.
So that was a bit of a fail on our part not doing that soon. I don't know how that kind of slipped our minds. Maybe it's something, I don't know.
You know,
Been a bit of a long day, to be fair, with all the failed recordings that we have had. Struggling to record properly, but finally now, I think basically the end of this episode. So
absolutely. Anyway, it was nice talking to you guys.
Yeah, we will see you next week. I think after some of these games are finished, maybe on the Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll record another episode talking about the games, mainly Arsenal. But for now, thank you for listening, or thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.
Take care, guys.
Peace.